I'm Brian Chima. I'm the Operations Director for Audubon Society of Western Pennsylvania. Today we are going to be going through the steps involved in constructing a chimney swift tower. We will be following a guide that we just developed, a step-by-step guide. This is downloadable from our website. So we are working today in a barn that we have on one of our nature reserves. The barn provides us with a really nice level surface to work from. And we will begin this whole process by prefabricating a number of different components that go into the chimney swift tower. This is the 4x8 sheets of T111 that we will be ripping down to create the tower columns for our swift tower. You'll notice the orientation of this. We've got grooves every 8 inches across the length of our sheet of T111. So the importance of these grooves is that when the birds are nesting inside of the tower, they'll actually use these grooves to affix their nest. So as we rip this panel down, we're going to want to make sure that these grooves remain horizontal inside the tower. We've assembled our first 2 panels. This now creates a 90-degree angle. And we're ready to install our 3rd panel. Now this is this next very important step. When we assembled the first 2 panels, we made this panel overlap this panel on the outside edge. This time we are going to want to make sure that our 3rd panel is on the inside of this panel. Effectively, this creates an alternating pattern where this panel overlaps this panel overlaps this panel. Okay, so once again, as we assemble this box, we're bringing in our 4th panel, and it is, again, important to be sure that we have alternating corners. All 4 of these corners in an alternating fashion creates a perfectly 15 3/4 inch square. So we've completed our 3 boxes for our tower column. And I want to provide a tip. As you can see on this box, the edge of the tongue is on the outside of the box. On this one, the tongue is on the inside of the box. So that when we're stacking these, this tongue slides inside of this tongue. We remove the corner, the overlapping corner of the tongue. So you can use a saw or something just like a hammer and a chisel. And I'm just going to remove the section where the tongue overlaps so that I'm creating basically an inside channel with this tongue. With the ends of the tongues removed, the sections that overlapped it during this previous step, we'll now illustrate how these columns will attach to one another. With our corners removed off of the tongues, we'll illustrate how this box fits inside of this box. And I'll also provide a tip. Again, this is only for illustrative purposes while we're here in the barn, but you will assemble these 2 columns together when you're in the field. My tip is, if you have a problem getting this section of tongue to fit inside of this groove, remove just the top screws out of all 4 corners of your lower column so that you have a little bit of wiggle room. These boards will move just a little bit. So that when you go to place this, the tongues very easily slide together. You have a little bit of wiggle room, and everything fits nicely together. So again, when you're in the field, you get your columns assembled. Don't forget to place your screws back in again. The next step of the process, we are going to prefabricate the roof structure for our kiosk. The entire roof structure is made out of 2x4s, all pressure treated, and what we will do to start is just cut everything to length. So If you're following along in our instructional booklet, we've got two 19-inch pieces of 2x4, two 16-inch pieces of 2x4. We've got two 45-inch lengths of 2x4 and two 48-inch lengths of 2x4, as well as 8 15.25-inch long 2x4s that are cut at a 30-degree angle on both ends. We'll get all of that lumber cut, and then we'll be ready to assemble the roof structure. The next step in the process, once we have all of the boards cut, is to create a couple of squares. So here we have our two 19-inch boards and our two 16-inch boards. I've placed the 16-inch boards on the inside of the 19-inch boards to create a perfect square. It's imperative that the inside of this square, once it's assembled, measures 16 inches. And the reason that that is important is because this is the inside of our roof framing. Our roof framing needs to slide down over top of our tower columns. The exterior dimension of our tower columns is 15.75 inches. So if we provide a 16-inch square, we'll have a quarter inch gap, enough room to be able to slide this down over top of our tower column. Next, I am building a 48-inch square box. In this step, I've taken the two 48-inch lengths of 2x4 and the two 45-inch lengths of 2x4, and I will assemble them using the same 3-inch screws. So we have our small inner square and our larger outer square positioned now. And as you'll notice, we have this small jig that we've constructed. While the jig is under this inner square, what I'll do is I'll take our angled rafter pieces and I will begin to position these so that they fit in their positions to form our roof framing. Using the same 3-inch exterior screws, I will start some screws from the inside toward the rafter. And then I am going to hold my rafter so that the top of the rafter is equal to the top of this square box. So I will just continue to move my way around, placing each of these rafters until I have them all secured to the inner square. We have finished our roof framing, and just to illustrate the importance of making sure that you have a 16-inch opening here, Dan is going to slide one of our tower columns down through the roof. So as you can see, that slid down there very easily. 15.75-inch outside diameter of this tower and a 16-inch opening here on your roof framing. The next step in our process is to cut the roof sheathing for our kiosk. As you can see, we end up with kind of an oddly shaped piece of plywood. We will need 2 full sheets of 23 32-inch plywood to complete the roof sheathing. My next step will be to mark at 20¼ inches and 38¼ inches at the top edge of my piece of sheathing. From there, I will take my chalk box and hook on to the bottom corner of the sheathing, and then right to my 20¼ inch mark, snap a line. Same thing on the other side, from the bottom corner of the sheathing to my 38¼ inch mark, snap a line. And then all I need to do is run my circular saw up those 2 lines, and I have my finished section of roof sheathing. Do that 4 more times. We've finished cutting our 4 sections of roof sheathing. These will actually be installed at a later point when we are out in the field, but just to show you how these fit, they will eventually center themselves right here on this framing, just like that. We've got a small overhang where we will put some fascia board at a later time. But as I said, for now, I just wanted to show you how this fit, and we will actually install the sheathing once we are out in the field. We have just a couple of other small components that we can prefabricate while we're here in the barn. This is the top to our chimney swift tower. This is the entrance flue that mimics a flue that comes out of a chimney. And this, of course, is the sheathing that will sit on top of one of our tower columns. Okay, so I've just cut out my 22-inch square. This piece of sheathing represents the top to our tower. And my next step is to mark the hole that needs to be cut in this for the sun collar. So I'm using my measuring tape. I'm gonna make a couple of marks at the center line of this 22-inch square, which is 11 inches. And then I am gonna come from 11 inches, 6 inches back to the 5-inch mark and make a few more marks. Okay, so what I have is 2 parallel lines of marks that are 6 inches apart, and the next thing I'll do is use a straight edge to connect these marks. Okay, so now that I have those 2 lines drawn, I am going to make marks. I turned my 22-inch square sideways, so my parallel lines are now running this way. And I'm going to make a mark at 5.5 inches and at 16.5 inches on that line, and the same thing here, 5.5 inches and 16.5 inches. Okay, so then once again, using my straight edge, I'm going to connect these marks. And I've now drawn out the 6 by 11 square that I need to remove from this top piece of sheathing. Okay, there is a couple of different ways to remove this section of sheathing. You can either use plunge cuts with your circular saw, which I will illustrate today. If you're not familiar with making plunge cuts, consider getting a drill and putting a 3/8 inch hole or a 1/2 inch hole in the 4 corners of your square, and then using a jigsaw to cut this section out. Again, for today, I'm going to illustrate how to make plunge cuts on this board. Okay, so as you can see now, I've removed the 6 by 11 inch section from this top sheathing, and our next step is to install our sun collar. So we have already completed the construction of our sun collar. Basically just cut the 4 sides of the sun collar and used 2-inch exterior screws to secure everything. What I will do is I will place this sun collar on top of the sheathing, and as you can see, the inside diameter or dimension of the sun collar is exactly the same as the hole that I just cut. So what we'll do is flip this over. Again, just make sure that everything stays nice and even so that there's no edges for the birds. And we will run a series of 2-inch screws down through this sheathing and into the sun collar to secure it. Okay, so we have our tower top completed. We have our sun collar on, and I'm going to turn it upside down. I'm going to make a few marks on here. If you measure in 3 1/4 inches and make a mark on all 4 sides, this will help you place this tower top on top of your tower column and get it nice and centered. So what I do is I just take this and line up those marks that I just made with the tower column. And it is perfectly centered. Now I'll just use 2-inch exterior screws, place a few screws down through this, and it'll fix to the top of the tower column. Okay, one more tip. When you're ready to secure your tower top down to the tower column, use your measuring tape and give yourself a few marks at 3 1/2 inches in from the outside edge. This will give you an idea of where the center of your tower column comes up underneath your top, so that your screws are centered in that wood when you put them in. This is the base to our tower column. We'll affix this to the bottom of one of our tower boxes. We've drilled several holes in this for ventilation purposes. And this will also restrict predators from climbing up inside of the box. For the bottom section of our tower column, we have this 16-inch square board that we cut previously, and we have to lay out the pattern that we're going to use to drill the ventilation holes. So what we do is measure 3 1/2 inches in from all sides of this piece of sheathing to establish the outer perimeter of holes. Okay, so I have marked the outside square, and I have marked every 1.5 inches on all sides of this square. And once again, I will just go ahead and connect all of those dots. Okay, I've got my drill with a 3/8 inch bit, and I will just begin drilling at the intersections of all of those lines. Okay, so we finished drilling our series of holes, and our next step is basically just to position this on the bottom of one of our tower columns. Important to note that this bottom section is going to be attached to the opposite tongue and groove section that you attached the top portion to. That way you're following the tongue and groove pattern so that all three of these tower columns fit together correctly. The next optional prefabrication step is to build the kiosk sides that will surround your Swift tower. Now I will mention that although it is much easier to build these in the workshop, pre-cutting these and pre-building them does come with a risk that your pre-cut size might not be perfect to fit the dimensions in between your 4x4s. So anything from the a variation in board thickness of the 4x4s to a miscalculation in your cut could potentially give you a panel that's slightly too wide to fit between your 4x4s. So I just mentioned that this is an optional step if you like the idea of using a flat surface to make these cuts and a flat surface to be able to build a picture frame around your panels. Please feel free to do so. And in this, basically, we'll just kind of show you what needs to happen here to get these things assembled in the workshop, the picture frame cut and assembled onto our T111 panels. The width of our panels will be 38 inches to fit between the inside edges of our 4x4 posts. So we'll go ahead and marks at 38 inches. Our next step to complete our kiosk panels is to cut 2x2s to create sort of a picture frame that'll go around the outside of the panel. These 2x2s will also be used to secure the panel to the 4x4 posts. So Dan is going to make cuts to make two 48-inch 2x2s and two 38-inch 2x2s. All of them will have 45-degree mitered cuts on the ends to create a picture frame effect. Okay, so we have our picture frame assembled out of our 2x2s. The next step is we're going to take this piece of T111 and lay it face down on top of the picture frame. And we will take our time to be sure that all of the edges and corners are perfect so that we're ready to screw this together. Okay, and then a few 2-inch screws through the back of the T111 into the picture frame will hold everything together. Heading into the field, we will pre-cut a number of the elements that we will use to complete our chimney swift tower. This is the LP Smart side that we use for the exterior sheathing. These need to be cut to 17 inches wide, and we're going to leave these at 96 inches long. We'll finish our length cuts when we're in the field to ensure that our sheathing is exactly the correct length to match the tower once we have it assembled. So I'll go ahead and mark at 17 inches and strike a line for my first rip. If you'd like to save some time in the field, you are welcome to pre-cut the insulation panels. 8.5 inches and 10 inches wide will give you the correct widths for your insulation panels to fit between the 1x4s on the tower. Of course, this is a very simple step, so you're welcome to wait until you're in the field and cut these while you're there. Doing that would ensure that you have the exact width to match the tower that you've just built. For now, I will go ahead and pre-mark these at 8.5 and 10 inches and make a few cuts. So Dan is going to begin marking some 2x6s. These 2x6s will eventually create sort of an H-shaped frame that we attach to the 4x4s of the kiosk. And the tower will actually sit down on that H-frame inside of the 4x4 posts. Okay, once again, to save a few minutes in the field, and while you have a level working space, you are welcome to pre-cut the flashing that you will use for the roof to tower connection to keep everything nice and waterproof. So we're using just a sheet of aluminum here. I will cut a length to 26 inches. And then I can make some additional marks for the folds so that things fit nice and square and tight on the tower. Okay, so my next step, I'm going to measure 4 inches in from the edge and make a mark. And I will measure 4 inches up from the bottom and make a mark. And then using my square from the side edge, just going to draw a line. So it's 4 inches up, 4 inches out, and I'm going to make a cut right on that mark. I'm going to repeat the process on the other side. Okay, so my cuts are all finished. 26-inch long piece of aluminum. I've measured 4 inches up, 4 inches in, and I've made a cut on both sides, and I've cut a 1-inch corner off of the bottom of each of these. The next step is to use a straight edge to mark a vertical folding line along the upper portion of this aluminum down to your 4-inch cut. And then the same thing on the opposite side. What that gives us is just a mark where we can set a straight edge on our aluminum, and just this upper tab we're going to fold along the edge of that straight edge to give us a approximately 90-degree angle. This can all be fine-tuned in the field. Again, you're just kind of getting things started and close to where they need to be while you've got a nice level surface to work on. Okay, so the next step is to make a bit of a bend along the length of this aluminum. This section is going to attach to the tower. We want this section to bend down and match the pitch of the roof. Easiest way to do that on your flat surface is to lay your straight edge out and line up the edge of this flap with your straight edge. And then holding everything tightly, just go ahead and give yourself a little bit of a crease right along the edge of that straight edge. We've decided to mock up the tower while we're in the workshop, just to give you all an idea as to how these components go together. So as you can see, we have one of our tower columns stacked on top of the middle tower column. This one happens to be the top. And we've gone ahead and just tacked on a couple of the 1x4s that were in our material package. These 1x4s are attached to the edges of all of the tower columns on all sides to provide vertical strength and stability to the towers. It's what physically holds this tower column to this tower column, and it's what physically creates the strength so that the tower doesn't just topple over. Continuing with our mock-up in the workshop, we've just tacked on another 1x4 to illustrate that, in fact, we have two 1x4s on this face of the tower column, again providing rigidity. This piece of insulation will fit very nicely between these 1x4s. The final step will be sheathing this with our sheathing once we're in the field, and then we'll provide some trim pieces to finish off the corners.